Hello. I guess a congratulations is in order. Mm-hmm. It's exciting times. Hi. At least he said it through that door this time. Well, there he is. What's up? Doing all right? Jinxed myself. Said at least he said it through that door and not that. Then he opened that door. I'm gonna lock it, but there's no hinges or anything on this door. It doesn't matter. Hello.
Hi. Right. Yeah, he was right when I walked.
I'll tell my husband that.
Right, I know.
Well, it seems Levi got my strongly worded letter. Just kidding. I was telling Skylar, I didn't need to correct him. I was sure enough people told him, your Devo is a little long, that he would never do it again. So we'll go ahead and get started. I appreciate Mel helping out last week and teaching. Mel has a very unique perspective because not only did he work in youth ministry, but now working at the college, he gets to see both sides of it. And so I appreciated him coming and sharing some of his stuff. I put him to work again this week. He's teaching the boys upstairs. So he made the mistake of saying one time yes, and now he's going to teach forever for me. So growing up, I don't know how things were done at your family's Thanksgiving, but at our Thanksgiving, there were two very different tables with two very different set of rules. One was just Thanksgiving, and then there was the kids' table. Anybody else have a kids' table growing up? Just my family, because they try to keep us away from everyone. I have a very big family, and so at family gatherings, it was always the adults sitting at one table with like the nice actual plates and napkins, and everybody's gathered around the table doing adult things. And then us, the kids, in the other room, usually around card tables, doing like a slightly dumbed down version of what was going on in the other room. And I share that because I think there are a lot of churches where that is their approach with young people. It is let's kind of keep them separated, and they kind of get to do what we do, but just like a lesser version of it. And what we're going to talk about tonight and over the next few weeks is the importance of relationships for young people. Not just relationships with other young people, but relationships within the church. And while I know a lot of the lessons that we've looked at are kind of geared towards those of us with kids still at home, these lessons especially, I hope will connect for all of us. I mean, for whether you've got kids at home or not, we as older Christians have an opportunity to make a real impact in the life of younger Christians. And so what I want to do tonight is spend a little bit of time kind of introducing the subject of relationships. There's several passages in which Jesus talks about kids. In a time in which children were not always appreciated and valued, Jesus always had a soft spot for kids. This is this passage in which some of the disciples are arguing about who is greater, and Jesus takes that opportunity to kind of humble them, and he pulls this kid up and he makes this claim. He says, "Whoever receives this child in my name receives me. Whoever receives me receives him who sent me. For he who is least among you all is the one who is great." And obviously using the child to make an illustration that in the kingdom of God, it's not about who's the best. Usually the least is considered greatest. And there are lots of other times in which Jesus used kids as an opportunity to show those around him that things were going to be different in his kingdom. And I share that because we need to welcome children in the same way that Jesus did. It's funny, there are moments in Scripture where Jesus is sitting and he says, "Let the little children come to me," and people are like, no, keep them back. And then sometimes the approach at church is, well, keep the we're trying to do church things here. Keep the kids. Is there like a room where we can put them where they can be puppets and stuff? So I want to say a couple things because we're going to talk about something, and I don't want to sound like I'm church bashing. So let me start by saying I have attended and worked for churches that have like children's Bible hour and children's church. This is not a shot at that, but it is a challenge for us to maybe reconsider the reasons behind some of those things. I've already talked about the fact that there are good reasons for young people to spend time with other young people. We have Bible classes tonight that are age appropriate. That's good. That's healthy and important. But I do want us to consider some of the times that we separate our children away and just ask ourselves, is that the way we should do it? Or should we maybe reapproach the subject? And look, I'll tell you, this is challenging for me because I'm a youth minister here. And there have even been times as I've been looking over some of this material where I'm like, maybe I am guilty of this, of separating the kids out in certain situations where they honestly should be spending time with other Christians. And so please, as we work through this, don't hear me say things and be like, oh, okay, I see what he's doing. He's taking shots at churches that do children's Bible hour. That's not what I'm doing. I'm just getting us to a place where we consider some of those things and the reasons why. And I will say that a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about tonight, I've had folks ask before, why doesn't North Mac do something like that? And a big part of the reason is some of the stuff we're going to be talking about tonight. So please don't go home thinking Jeremy said people who have children's Bible hour are the devil. Please don't do that. My in-laws go to church just like that. I love them very much. But I want us to think about the motives behind what we do, all right? And so just like we've done in all of these, we're going to look at some of the findings that they collected from some of their research, and then just the practical ways that we put that into practice in our lives, all right? So this is what we're going to do over the next 3 weeks as we talk about relationships. Tonight, we're just going to talk about relationships in general, the importance that they play on our young people. And if we want our kids to hold on to their faith as they get older, how important relationships are. Then next week, we're going to specifically talk about how we as the church create an atmosphere where that's possible, where our kids can build relationships, not just with us, and not just with our youth minister, but with other adults in the congregation. And then week 3, may step on my own toes, but we're going to talk a little bit about like what a healthy youth group experience should look like. Now, before you're like, 3 weeks, I'm not coming, I'm not in the youth group. We as a church have a responsibility to our young people to make sure that their experience in youth group is healthy and looks the way it's supposed to. And as I look around this room, there are people in this room who, they don't have kids in the youth group, but they've played a vital role in the development and growth of the faith of those kids. And so we'll walk through those different areas, but all of it will kind of hinge on what we introduced tonight. All right, so here are some of the findings that they collected from their research. Not a lot of them are real shocking. One thing they found is that involvement in all church worship is linked with mature faith. Just by all church worship, that means that time on Sunday mornings when we are all in there together. They found that there is a definite link between kids who have a mature faith and those who are consistently participating in that worship time. Like I said, that's why, or part of the reason why, North MacArthur has made the choice that we just have one worship. Our kids are in there with us. And look, as someone with an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, believe me when I say, there are Sundays where I'm like, it would be so nice if I could just send my kids off to another room. But part of the reason I'm here today, part of the reason that my faith is where it is because long ago, when I would rather have been running around or screaming, I was sitting in a pew next to my mom, listening to her sing, watching her as she read along with the scripture. These findings show us that is important. It is important for our kids to be in there. And so, again, I'm not saying that it's impossible for kids to grow up and have a mature faith if they are spending time outside of that worship. But it's important. And we're going to talk a little bit more later about like how do we get our kids in there? Because some of you've got kids that are like not interested. I don't want to be in there. And especially in our current culture where I can just watch online, we have the tendency to want to be like, yeah, that's fine. We'll just watch online. You know, there's something about being there with the church family that's incredibly important. In fact, in the book that goes along with this, they said that when they were collecting this research, they were hoping for like that silver bullet, the one thing that like, if you just do this with your kids, like guaranteed their faith is going to stick. Doesn't happen. There are just too many different factors. But they did say the one thing that they found that was closest to like a home run was this. The fact that the majority of kids who stuck with their faith were consistently in a church where they were in all church worship. And like for me, that's huge. And so it should give us pause and make us think, okay, like what are we doing in that time to help create an atmosphere where they do feel a part of it? And look, I already told you that I've stepped on my own toes and I'm having to rethink some of the things we've done in the past. Over the last couple weeks, I've really been wrestling with the idea that our youth group all sit up together in worship. Because as I'm looking at this, I'm like, I know we're in the same room, but are we separating them out? You know what I mean? But then at the same time, there are pros. And so I'm sharing that to let you know, like, this is a process. I have not figured this out. But I do think there is something beneficial to a child being in worship with other adults, participating with those adults, not just with youth. All right, and we'll look more at that as we work through some of this stuff. But that was the one thing they found that they said was incredibly important. All right, going beyond that, they said that teenagers who serve young children build sticky faith. So it's not just about young people creating relationships with older Christians. It's also important for them to begin building relationships with younger people. And so I love that we already have girls in our youth group who sign up to help in our Bible classes. There was a time like 5 years ago where as a Bible class teacher, I was like, no, like they need to be in their youth class. And that was probably just ego or I don't know, probably like that's not the way and now I'm like, no, that's good. That's important for them. It's important for young people to have experiences serving younger children. I love that at Vacation Bible School, our teenagers sign up and they walk around with a group of young kids and they help them out and teach. And look, if you've ever been here for VBS, there are some who are super, super good at that. And then there are some boys who are just there. But you know what? It's good. It's good. There are times where I'm like, are you one of the kids or are you one of the leaders? I don't know. Okay. I think you're one of the leaders. But even that, it's good for them because they are building relationships with younger people and older people. And that's the key to all of this is we don't want young people who only have relationships with people who are their age. Because at some point, if those people are going through the same challenges and the same difficult times of life that you are, you don't have those anchors in other areas. And so, yes, it's important to build relationships with the older people, but they also find serving kids, that's important too. Number 3, support from adults in your congregation is incredibly important. So they collected all this information, some from high schoolers, some from college kids. Part of this comes from some research they did with high school seniors. And high school seniors ranked 5 different groups of individuals on the impact that they are currently making on their life. And it was like parents, peers, church leadership. I can't remember all. But then the last one was just other adults in the congregation. But then they did another question that was, when they do invest in you, which ones make the most impact? And all of them, number 5 was much higher on the list because it's important for them. They just don't feel like it happens very much. Thankfully, look, I always think there are things we can do better, but I'm thankful that here at North MacArthur, I feel like we've got a lot of older Christians who are super interested in making investments in our young people. So I don't see this as often as other groups probably do. But these high school seniors said, yeah, it's important for us to have relationships with older Christians. And they also did some research with college freshmen. And these college freshmen said that it was incredibly important for them to hear from members of their church. And look, I'm a youth minister. And there are times where I'm like, oh man, I haven't talked to so-and-so in, months. And like, shame on us. Sometimes I get it. It's the out of sight, out of mind. They go off to college and we forget about them. These college freshmen said it's incredibly important that they hear from members and say, hey, just wanted to let you know, praying for you. Wanted to reach out to you and let you know that I know you're gone, but we haven't forgotten about you. That makes a huge impact for young people, all right? And so hopefully throughout the next 3 weeks, you just start thinking about ways that I know for many of us, the reason we're in a class like this is because we're thinking about our own children, and that's great. But also, I hope you're thinking about ways that you can make an impact in the lives of other people's kids as well. And then this one isn't surprising to me, but I think it was good that they included. It said, college freshmen have difficulty finding a church. And they have lots of reasons why they think it's true. But here's what I think, just based on the time I've worked with kids. We have a lot of kids who spend 6 to 7 years getting an experience, a youth group experience. And everything is catered to them. We take trips just for them. And we have fun times up at the building just for them. And then they graduate, and guess what? It's like people are like, all right, see ya. And they're like, well, what about the fun stuff we were doing? Oh, we don't do that anymore. Now you're just the church. And it's like, what? And now what you see happen in some places is they're like, well, then we will have a college ministry. And what you do is you prolong it for 4 years, and you have retreats, and you have activities, and you hold on to them for a little bit longer. Then they graduate college, and they're gone. And I mean, you could talk to Mel and Becky, who've worked with the 20s group for a long time. There is a reason the 20s group is always the group that struggles the most with consistent attendance. It is because you have young people who have always had a program built around them, and then there's nothing. Now look, I don't think that the solution is, well, then stop doing the fun stuff. Just tell them, like, from early on, this is just not fun. I don't think that's the answer. and not just because I want to keep my job. But I do think there are things that we can do to make sure our kids' experience in youth group isn't a separated experience in which we take them off for 6 to 7 years and we let them spend time together and we train them up, and then we expect them to just like go build relationships with adults at other churches. And so I think one of the reasons why college freshmen have a hard time finding churches is because they honestly don't even know what they're looking for. They walk in a church and they're like, I've never done it like this before. I usually walk in and there's some goofball that they've hired that's always grinning and playing stupid games, and he just like entertains us, and so we keep coming back, and now that person's not here anymore. So what do I do? And so all of this to say, again, I'm not saying, hey, let's get rid of the youth group experience, but we need to do some work to blend our young people in with the rest of our congregation so that when they do graduate, they've already learned how to interact with other adults.
I think
Okay.
we as parents have to do a better job of making sure that it's not our faith they're leaving with when they get there. It's
Absolutely.
their faith, because if they don't have their own faith set at that point, chances are it's not going to happen.
Yeah, big time.
At least not right then.
Big time. And we're going to talk about some of that along the way here. But what Stephen said is absolutely right. And that's why, going back to number 1 about the importance of being in worship, that's not all it is. I mean, I don't want anybody to be fooled into thinking like if you just make your kids come to church every Sunday, then their faith will stick. It doesn't work that way either. I know kids who were forced to come to church every single Sunday and every Sunday night and every Wednesday night, and they don't want to have anything to do with the church. So it's not a easy fix. That's just part of it. The relationship part, helping them, not just Stephen's kids are mirroring his faith, but they've seen it in others too. And so like, okay, so this isn't just mom and dad's faith. I'm seeing it within this community of believers. Then it's more likely to become their own, like Stephen's saying.
Also, the relationship building is key, because I know as a fairly recent family to join this church,
Sure.
this church is unique in how they reach out and kind of grab hold of you and bring you in. And that's not common.
Yeah,
And so teaching our kids how to do that themselves, go somewhere, find a church, reach out. It's
Yeah.
an important skill they have to learn.
yeah, absolutely. And we are very blessed here. And I mean, that comes on the back of a lot of people's really hard work in building that culture. But you're right. I mean, they're going to go to churches that may not be as welcoming and may not have elaborate programs that draw you in. And then what? And look, I don't have like written down research to back this up, but I'll just tell you, when I think of kids that have come through our youth group who still have a strong, mature faith, almost all of them are kids that I know had strong relationships with others in the congregation outside of the youth group. I mean, I would bet most people in this room know who Tucker Wilson is. Like, he didn't care if you were 1 or 101. That boy will drop into a conversation with you like it's nothing. And there's a reason why his faith is still important to him. And it's not just that. He's got a mom and dad who worked really hard, but all of those things are factors. And so, yeah, like Brian is saying, if we can't teach them how to build those relationships and how to understand the forming of relationships and those initial stages and what it takes, they're going to get to a place and it's going to be hard, and they're going to go, no thanks. I don't want to do that. Okay, so these are just some of the findings that they collected from their research. Just kind of keep those in the back of your mind as we work through some of this practical stuff, all right? So the first thing I want to talk about is what they call the 5-to-1 ratio. So one thing in youth ministry, like when we take trips and stuff, we always talk about like a ratio. We want to make sure we have enough adults for the kids. And usually it's like, they say 1 to 5. And I was like, whoops, I'm doing this wrong. But you have some set ratio, like this many adults to be able to chaperone this many kids. And they said, what if we flipped it? And not for trips and things. Like, I'm not trying to take 5 adults on a Six Flags trip for every kid we take, because can't afford that many hotel rooms. Unless you want to pay for it yourself, then you are welcome to come with us to Six Flags and to the lock-in. Anybody? No? I am always, I feel like those commercials that come on in every single break on TV, you're like, we just saw this. That's going to be me with lock-ins. When I can sneak that in, I'm going to. But what if we decided that within our kids' life, for every one of our kids, we wanted to make sure that they had 5 strong, meaningful relationships with other mature Christian adults in our congregation? If that was our goal, they have found that makes a difference. And so, look, we're going to talk about how those 5 might be made up. And this isn't like a legalistic, well, look, you've already got 5. I can't mentor your kids. Sorry, that would be 6. But it's just this idea that I think a lot of parents, and I know for me, with my kids, I think, okay, that's my job. So it's me and Carrie. And look, we've got other family. We've got grandparents and stuff that pour into them. But it's important for them to have relationships with groups outside of just our family. And so consider not just like, we'll see how it happens, but like sitting down and thinking, who are my 5 for my kids that I know they have a strong relationship. Look, I know my parents, they never sat down and wrote out a 5-to-1 ratio for me. But I also know to this day, adults that were in my life growing up that even now I could call them up and say, hey, I got a pretty serious question I was hoping I could talk with you about. And they'd be like, absolutely. They're not family, but they're like family. That's how they feel to us. And so this is something we should think about. Not just me and my wife, or me, the wife, and the youth minister if he can help out, but who else do I have that's in their life pouring into them, all right? And so there are some things that build on that. So number 1, or it's number 2 on there, but you get it. This has to be an intentional thing. You need to think about, like, who are my kids spending time with? What other adults do they interact with? And what can I do to create more opportunities for them to be around those people? It has to be intentional. If you are like a type A personality and you're going to go home and write down your 5 people and have it so that you know, that's great. If you're like me and you're like, I got it, that's fine too. But you got to be intentional with it. Carrie and I, so we have different, I feel like, bubbles within our life. We've got family, we've got church family, but I'm also blessed that I have a really close group of friends that I went to high school with and to college with, and we all still live in the same area. Feels like one of those sitcoms where they aren't really creative. They just keep bumping. It's like the college years, and now their kids are hanging out. And so Carrie and I frequently, like once a month, get together with my brother and 2 other guys that I grew up with, and as it so happens, it worked out really well. We all have girls that are the same ages, and they get to spend time together, but they also interact with those adults. And so for me and Carrie, we know, like, those are adults that my kids are building relationships with. That's important. We also have people here at church that they have, good relationships with. When we come through the office, they always stop by Mr. Tim's office. It's because he has candy. But Mr. Tim did a good job of tricking them to build a relationship. And so guess what? My girls love Tim and Tawny. They just love them. And they spend time with them and they interact with them. And that's really, really good for my girls. Because I don't want them to just look to me and Carrie as the pillars of their faith. I want them to look at other people too. Obviously, everything is rooted in Jesus, right? That's the pillar. But I want other people in their life that they are getting to know. So when we go to lunch with Craig and Tandy, that's good for my girls. They get to interact and talk to them. When we have people over into our home, that's really good, not just for us, but for our kids. And so you are going to have to be intentional and decide, what people am I going to put in my kid's life? Some of you are sitting right there and you know that the people your kids spend the most time with aren't Christian people, aren't the kind of influence that your kids need. And so you may have to get creative on some ways that you can introduce adults into their life that are going to be a positive influence for them. And like I said, I can still think back on people who, they're not family members. They were just people that my parents helped put into my life that helped me get to where I am. But it was an intentional thing, right? So you got to be intentional about it. Be explicit, and what that means is don't keep it a secret. Don't hide it from your kids. If your kids find out, what's this list of 5 people? And why are they people we hang out with a lot? That's weird. Just tell them. You know what I'm finding with kids is when you're open with them, they actually really appreciate it. And so if you just said, hey, we're doing this class right now, and we're talking about the importance of having relationships with older Christians and how helpful that is for your future faith. And look, I just wanted you to know these are some people that we have purposefully put into your life to be a mentor and a help for you. And I'm guessing your kids aren't going to be like, well, then I don't want to spend time with them anymore. They'll be like, all right, whatever. So that's kids. But they know. They know those things. Look, I never had a sit down with my parents in which they're like, can we share with you who the 5 families are? That sounds very mob-like. The 5 families. But I knew who my parents had chosen to be a part of our life, to be not just every once in a while, but a regular, consistent part of my life. And I know those families by name. To this day, I could still tell you who they are. I could tell you where they live. I could tell you stupid games I've played in all of their basements. But that was work on my parents' part. It wasn't just because they were people my parents enjoyed hanging out with, though they did. They were people that my parents knew it was important for us to be around. So tell your kids. Tell them what you're up to. Try to be sneaky. Especially as we get into some of these others, talking about mentoring and trying to introduce maybe people they don't usually spend time with. If you tell them up front, like, hey, I think it'd just be really good for you to spend time with them. Okay. If they fight you on it, then you got to be creative. And then, surprise, Dale's here. You're like, Dale? Oh, I don't know. Just spring it on them. But tell them this is what we're doing, and this is why we think it's important. It will be helpful. Number 4, encourage mentoring. Look, this is something the church has got to be better about. I had mentors growing up, but I feel like for the most part they happened very naturally. They're just people I was around a lot, and so it just happened naturally. As older Christians, we have got to be doing a better job of finding individuals and saying, I'm going to be a mentor to them. Look, you can't just walk up and be like, Landon, sorry, I'm now your mentor. He's like, what? Do I have a say in this? No, bud, sorry. That's how it works. You can't just pick a random kid out of the auditorium and just walk up and be like, you've never met me, but I will be mentoring you. Maybe pick some people that are in your life. But mentoring should be something that we seek for. Craig, sorry, you're getting called out because you're sitting front and center. I know of tons of guys who have come to our preacher's training camp, and we always have a night where we get up and we talk about someone who has made a meaningful impact in your life. And we'll get kids who will stand up and say their mom or their dad or a preacher. Then I always make the staff get up and, hey, you got to share somebody. And every year, Pops, Craig. And it's not because like Craig has set up a mentoring business where he's like, hey, Craig Dodgen, mentor at law. I don't know. He just is there and he's available. And so when Trey Evans and when Josh Basic and when John Arvin and guys like that come through our preachers camp, they point at Craig and they're like, that's someone that's mentored me. And I can't speak for Craig, but I know Craig sees that as important because there were people who were a mentor for him.
I was going to say, like you said, you just have to be in the crowd and around and be available. And it's always surprised me. I say that all the time. But the ones that I think I can help this young man, and it just doesn't seem to work out, but it happens organically. And then it's somebody else who says, oh, you really did something that helped me. I thought, I wasn't even trying.
Yeah.
But it worked out. And then, like you just, there's a long list, and I still don't understand how it happens. But I'm there.
Yeah.
And ready when it's...
And that's a huge part of it, is just the being there. No kid is going to pick a mentor that they'd never see. Like, you know what? I see that guy from across the room. He looks so wise over there. I'd like him to be my mentor. No. You spend time with the person, you're like, man, that's a person I can trust. That's a person that always seems to be willing to talk and have open conversations. And most kids, they don't call it a mentor. You know what they call it? A friend. Like, yeah, possibly my friend. But that's important. So that's important for us as individuals who are willing to be mentors. It's also important for us as parents to seek that out for our kids. Look, again, it doesn't have to be super official. You don't have to call someone up and say, hey, would you be willing to mentor my kid? But if you want to, I think that's great. I think it's really important for us to know people within our kids' life that can mentor them, that can bring them along. I mentioned Dale. Dale is great at this. When we get a new intern that comes in, Dale, we call him Mr. Miyagi because they'll walk in and Dale's like, hey, you're coming with me today. And they're like, oh, okay, great. And like our interns are hoping to like learn ministry. And they'll be like, what are we doing today? And Dale's like, oh, yeah, we've got some logs out in Midwest City that we need to chop up, and we need to load them in my truck and drive them over to Edmond.